Recording, yes.
Well, so welcome. And tonight, Barry and Philip are going to be presenting chapters 43 and 44. Two terrific chapters. So take it away, gentlemen.
All righty. Yes, these are terrific chapters. And actually, I have to apologize. I have a bit of a cold here, so I may call up a John to fill in at some point. But in any case, the previous section of this book was on mindfulness or shamatha practice, and now we're moving on to vipassana. And I think it's worth pointing out the importance of this because we're spending quite a bit of time going into a lot of detail about different aspects of mindfulness of mind, of effort, of life, for instance, and as we will with vipassana, that the largest section of this book we're studying, the Hinayana, is on meditation. So to begin, Vajrayana refers to the sense of precision that could arise from sitting practice of meditation and slowly infiltrate our everyday life. Right here is a couple of words that caught me. The sense of precision, and that comes from mindfulness of mind, which is something that was presented in the class. Clear seeing. Now, most of you are aware that meditation practice that we do here is not confined to shamatha mindfulness. It's a hybrid in that elements of vipassana are part of it. That we sit with the eyes open, we go out with the breath, and these are the vipassana or awareness elements. And it is the awareness in our practice that connects us with the rest of the world. You see, without that, shamatha in itself is a self-contained world. So vipassana is not just an element of sitting practice. It is an awareness that can be experienced in any of the moments of our lives. I've heard the criticism come up from time to time. Someone in the course of study will say, oh yeah, that's all great and everything, but what about real life? Well, vipassana is the answer. Now, primarily now, though, we are focused on the practice of sitting meditation at this point. There are two different schools of vipassana, the analytical contemplative way and the non-analytical experiential way. And Jogam Trungpa comes from what's known as the practice lineage of the Kagyu, which is very much experiential in its approach. But one of his main teachers happened to be from a different lineage where there was more of a contemplative approach. So he brings both of those to his presentations here. Just briefly, the analytical approach includes study and contemplation generally about the nature of reality. The experiential is in the meditation practice that we do here, where awareness of the breath is extended out to include the environment. Shamatha provides the ground, but too much emphasis on shamatha practice could be a problem. It is said that one should not be attached to the pond of shamatha, but let the flower of vipassana bloom. that shamatha practice, mindfulness practice alone, has many benefits, but it is self-involved. And it can be kind of like going into a room and closing the door to escape the chaos of life. Taking shelter in shamatha is a perversion of shamatha discipline, So it is very important to convert the relaxation of shamatha meditation into the post-meditation activity of vipassana. This can be said to be like opening that door and letting some fresh air in. And last week we talked about the pitfalls of fascination with momentary experiences or even trance states, or for that matter, any other element of this practice. That it's important not to try to cling to it. Vipassana is entirely different from shamatha. Shamatha practice could be regarded as a way of quieting and pacifying the mind. Having already become quiet, we could expand out and extend ourselves. So, yeah, like opening the door and letting in some air, stepping out. With Vipassana, rather than cutting down our mental perceptions, we sharpen our awareness. So, well, I think that's pretty clear in itself. That, in other words, instead of having so much of a focus on, now I'm thinking, returning to the breath, or any of that, it becomes more about sharpening our awareness, becoming more aware of what's going on, what we're doing. Now, Vipassana is referred to as insight or the seat of prajna, though through Vipassana, we can hear the teachings properly. We can hear the teachings properly because we've quieted the mind with shamatha and have developed the clear seeing of Vipassana. So without that, things are distorted, obfuscated by ego, by the commentary of the watcher, of you try to listen to or study the teachings, and in every moment you're questioning them, you're distracted, you're wondering what's in it for me, is this threaten my ideas about. So it is through shamatha and vipassana that we can begin to come out of that kind of fog. It's as if we're looking at an old black and white grainy photo instead of looking at the real scene before us. Or I guess today it's more like, instead of holding up the phone and looking at the screen, but being here. See? And then we can really hear the teachings. Vipassana practice includes a contemplative approach of pondering the Dharma intellectually, as well as meditative practice of the development of awareness. Now, in the contemplative practice of Vipassana, speculative mind is used as a way of looking beyond oneself. This is what we're doing right now. We're hearing the teachings and imagining what is being described, what that could be like. This is speculative. And that in doing this, you're no longer just looking out for yourself. See, this is important. that as the ego can become somewhat subdued, it's another element of hearing the teachings, is to really take them in without it all being about me. In Buddhist philosophy, you are venturing out into different ground than the ground you find secure. So the watcher always brings us back into our self-involvement. Without the obfuscation of the watcher, the ego, we can enter a different world, really. And this can be a very vivid experience. The Buddhist approach is to take a further leap and create your own nest in space. And he says that is the philosophical approach of Buddhism. It is precisely the approach of Vipassana, if not Prajna. This is an important point. The definition of Dharma altogether is absence of aggression. You see, it means being without aggression, without the need to change the world to fit our needs, without the need to change the people we encounter or are very close to us to fulfill our desires or to allay our fears or to to make us whole, as people like to say sometimes. All of that is a kind of aggression. It's like you're imposing your will, you're reaching out beyond yourself to change the world so that you can feel more comfortable with it. It is a way of dealing with aggression, and shamatha is the starting point. Shamatha brings clear thinking and slows you down. And that's important, that as you begin to see the behaviors that just seem to be a part of who you are, this can really wake you up. It can be something that really changes one and does take you to a different place. And it is because it's slowing down, that a lot of aggression comes from the speediness of our minds, especially if there's some sort of emotional trigger and the mind can just take off. The stories just come pouring into our consciousness, and we begin reliving all kinds of stuff, terrible things that have happened that we now must do something about, or anxieties we have, all of that. So it really is a shamatha about slowing down and being able to think clearly. He says, because anger or aggression is based on speed and confusion, shamatha leads to the absence of aggression. And now he goes into the 5 skandhas, and he says the 8 types of consciousness in the 5 skandhas are all momentary events. And that's the main point. I'm not going to go too much into that, but of course, the skandhas are what's presented in this image we've seen of the wheel of life or the wheel of becoming, and they describe the development of samsara, of what happens with us as events happen and we move from one state to another. And the point here is that all of these states change, and we move from one to another, sometimes in the space of a few moments, and that in that movement, gaps are created, and those gaps are an opportunity. So he says, so ego, which of course this is a description of ego, is not a constantly smooth running, highly secured situation at all. There are psychological gaps of all kinds. So he says the ego or the five skandhas is regarded more as fickleness than as continuity. So, of course, opportunities are presented. Now, the reason we can arouse potential prajna by means of vipassana is because there are such gaps. Because of those gaps, it is possible to insert vipassana to relate with unconditioned mind. Right? I mean, up until now, the concentration has been on mindfulness. So, of course, we're aware of this idea of a gap, there being a moment between things, in that moment when you become aware that you're lost in thought, for instance, and that each time that happens, you're presented with an opportunity. And it is not just an opportunity to return to your breath, it can also be an opportunity to develop vipassana or clear seeing. The technique or means of developing vipassana practice is exactly the same as in the third foundation of mindfulness of effort. It is sudden effort, a sudden glimpse or of awareness that brings us back to the practice. And actually, in many parts of this chapter here, relate pretty directly to mindfulness of effort, mindfulness of mind especially. So the basic technique is to see the shadow or echo of the awareness and then disown it. So referring to mindfulness of mind, it is the transcendent watcher of mindfulness of mind that sees the shadow or echo of awareness, the plain knowing awareness of awareness itself. You become aware that you're thinking and you return to the breath. And at the same time, there can be the transcendental watcher that knows this is happening. And then disown it. And I like that word, disown it. Do not try to own it. Let it go. If there's a need to hang on to it, trying to grab it, just be aware of that. And the fact is, it's a fool's errand anyway. These events of awareness cannot be solidified. They are unconditional awareness, awareness of what is. And what is changing in every moment. Actually, there are no moments, there's only change. In Vipassana, there is a new attitude toward that sudden abstract flash. That's the flash of the watcher, of the transcendent watcher. In shamatha, you have a flash and then you faithfully go back to shamatha practice. In Vipassana, when you have that sense or shadow or echo, you do not quite go back all the way, but halfway. You are making use of the flash, not trying to go right back. I think of this sometimes as being like seeing something out of the corner of your eye. But if you turn to look at it, it's gone. And that's what these moments can be like. So it is just having an awareness of them, that you become aware you're thinking and you return to the breath, but at the same time, you're also seeing it happen. And this can only work, of course, when the mind is quiet, relaxed, open, and that comes from shamatha. So that means that you're working, there is no overt effort or striving. I think this could be thought of as a deep mental relaxation. So, one of the subtleties of Vipassana practice is that we can still apply exactly the same methods of meditation that we used at the beginning as shamatha. With Vipassana, mindfulness of breathing becomes awareness of breathing. So the implication there is it's a lighter touch. In shamatha practice, you are purely relating with the verge of breathing, the outline of breathing, using a light touch. In Vipassana, it is slightly more than that, in the sense that our attitude to the breathing has otherness involved in it. The breathing happens not only of its own accord, but in the realm of the atmosphere around it. So it is not relating the breathing quite so tightly or intimately to the self. It is just seen. And he says it could be very difficult to understand exactly what we are getting into with Vipassana. No kidding. But if a person has a really good understanding of shamatha practice and its own sense of space, Vipassana practice becomes much easier to work with. And in some sense, the difference between the two meditation practices is that in spite of its vision, its feeling, its inspiration, and its discipline, shamatha is very literal, whereas Vipassana is more romantic or poetic. And I relate this to art, or creativity, right? That when Vipassana awareness comes more into our daily life, that there's more art in our life, there's more creativity, more spontaneity. So, first, he says, there is shamatha to tighten up your practice, to make it definite and ordinary. So, in other words, it is knowing your mental state. In the beginning, we come to this, most of us, without really even knowing what's going on up here. And then as we meditate and develop in the practice, to begin with, you may start out with labeling your thoughts, thinking. This is clearly defining what is happening. I'm lost in thought. Now I'm coming back to the breath. Oh, I'm thinking. Now I'm going out with the breath. It's identifying it clearly. So he says, after you have practiced shamatha meditation, from then onward up to tantric practices, most of the techniques you practice are letting go techniques of all kinds. And that starts with shamatha. That as you become more familiar, and it becomes more natural to become aware that you're thinking and just to return to the breath. And that can become a lighter and lighter touch. So with this practice over time, you don't have to identify so clearly. You just know that you've just woken up. And you can let go of labeling. And that is an aspect of letting go at this level. In Vipassana, as in shamatha, sitting practice relates with the breathing. As breathing is felt, you go out with the breath. As the breath dissolves, you dissolve. This is something we've certainly heard in the instruction that begins our meditation sessions. But there is also an echo. You have developed your mindfulness practice so that as you breathe out, you know you are breathing out. That echo is not regarded as harmful or dangerous. Such awareness may be the seed of discriminating awareness. In other words, you might say it is awareness of awareness itself. This echo he speaks of, that as your attention moves from one place to another, as your state of mind changes, there is this knowing, this awareness of knowing that that is what's happening. Awareness happens and it also dies. So you do not have to be aware of the breathing as you're breathing, particularly. You can become aware of it just as breath. It's something that's happening. So mindfulness is very serious, he says, but if you have awareness with that mindfulness, you begin to see the seriousness of the mindfulness, and your mindfulness is lightened. So, because you're not so much in the seriousness, things open up a bit. But, he warns, this doesn't mean going freestyle. The discipline is still there and still important. And that actually, this can happen at any moment of your life. When you are heavily involved in anything, you can see yourself. You can have that flash of awareness. Wow, look at that. And then you continue doing whatever it is, but there's a lightness to it now. I am going to tell, I think there's a little time here, I'm going to tell a little story. When I did a solitary retreat several years ago, and which is where you're in a cabin, and what you do with every waking hour is meditate. That's it. And several days into this, I don't know, after quite a while, the setup, there was a little shrine there, and there was a picture of Chogyam Trungpa up on the wall. And after a while, I would look at him and I would get the sense that he was laughing at me. And as if he was saying, ah, look at this guy. Boy, he's working so hard at being a good meditator and doing it right and just laughing. And I relate that to what's being talked about here. Mindfulness is serious, but we don't have to take it so seriously, I guess. So, what else do we have here? Just a moment. Okay. From a purely shamana perspective, he says, the element of vipassana results in your actions not being as honest as good and as good as in the past. So there's a kind of a funny thing here he's commenting on. In other words, that as you lighten up a bit, there could be a tendency to think that in some way you're not taking the practice as seriously or something. His message is, that's okay, but don't try to make it, don't try to solidify it. And I'm going to just go to the end of this section here. He says, at this point, we are not discussing anything all that advanced. What we are discussing is just the light little shadow that goes along with your mindfulness, which is known as awareness practice. right? It's a subtle thing, but yeah, it goes along with you. It's a light little shadow. As far as meditation technique of Vipassana is concerned, it continues to be based on the coming and going of the breath. However, with awareness, we learn how to handle ourselves and to work with ourselves because we can begin to see ourselves and to actually see all of this going on. So, I would like to pass this off to Philip or John, if you have any comments.
Well, thanks, Mary. That was great. Yes, we have time. If John has additions or comments or others have questions, pressing questions addressed to this chapter, let's do that.
I'll just summarize. We start with shamatha meditation, which is very precise and aware of the breath. We might even count the breaths if we like. In breath, out, 1. In breath, out, 2. And our awareness is very literally on this thing, the breath. Thoughts come up and interrupt that awareness. We see them and we let them go. So with shamatha, we're learning to let go of our thoughts, which interrupt our awareness and take us off into dream, and come back to awareness, in this case, of the breath, of one thing. It could be anything. It could be a candle flame. It could be the statue in front of you. It could be me sitting here talking to you. You come back to that of simple awareness. And in doing that, you achieve a number of things. You begin to develop the muscle, as it were, of recognizing when you're lost in dreams and coming back. You experience awareness of this present moment. And you get a rest from the anxiety of thought. But this isn't something that you can do as a way of life. You can't walk down the street focusing on your breath. You might stumble into a fire hydrant or have an accident or all kinds of things because you're not really aware. You're focused on this one thing. And so, having come back from dream, which is really what shamatha is all about, coming back from the dream of thought into awareness, then we can expand that awareness into this space. Here we are now. Instead of being aware of just the breath, we can be aware of all of this. Here we are, the room, everything, the screen in front of you, the sound of this voice, the feeling of your bottom on the cushion. All of that comes and goes from time to time, and your awareness is wide, it's open, it's easy, it's effortless. And this is Vipassana. The shamatha is so helpful and important. We constantly find ourselves lost in thought. We get angry with somebody. Oh, they shouldn't have said that to me. And that person, I'm going to get even with them. And oh, that's a blah, 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 blah. And then we are lost in thought. And then we realize, ooh, I'm lost in this daydream. You can let it go. And then you're back wherever you may be, standing on the corner of 42nd and Broadway in Manhattan, or wherever you are. And that's Vipassana. So the shamatha is recognizing when you're thinking, seeing it, letting it go, and then you come back, and the Vipassana is you come back to this, to life, here and now. This is our practice. Coming back to life, coming back to our lives, whatever it may be happening. And it becomes more and more effortless, because effort is always a little bit of a focus. And it takes us away from this open awareness. It's a focus on some kind of purposefulness, that effort. We want to achieve something. And so it becomes more and more effortless, more and more open, more and more completely relaxed and natural, this vipassana. We come back and then we find that we're lost dreaming again. You see, oh yeah, I've been dreaming. And you let the thoughts go, you come back. So that's my comment. And you could read this chapter over and over. It is so good about all this. It's really extraordinary, I think, this chapter in lining all of this out. He talks about ego and the sudden glimpse of awareness. Ego is, what am I doing? How am I achieving anything? And then, boom, it breaks open. And here we are in a sudden glimpse of awareness, the ego gap. He talks about the Vipassana technique. It's a sudden glimpse of awareness that brings us back. Back to what? Back to wherever we happen to be. So shamatha, the ongoing technique or discipline, is the core. It's when we really realize, oh yeah, I've been thinking again. I should come back, let go of the thought, come back, and whatever you choose to come back to, that's the shamatha. Vipassana is when you come back, you let go of that, and here you are. He says, letting go. First there is shamatha, tight practice. And then as you progress, the practice of letting go, you let go more and more. And this extends all the way into Tantra. A continual and gradual and ongoing letting go. Letting go of what? Letting go of self, letting go of self-control, letting go of self-consciousness. Into what? When you let go into this. Here we are. We're already here. So that's, I guess, what I have to say. Shamatha and Vipassana, they're really wonderful. The shamatha cleans us up. We constantly find ourselves, we're in the other course, we're talking about aggression and patience. Patience is realizing, oh, I'm having aggressive thoughts. Let them go. You're practicing patience. And you come back into this awareness. So I'm going to stop. Fred, you had the hand raised.
Yeah, but the letting go seems to be really tricky. Yeah, like I noticed today, after a particularly rough day, I was just standing, waiting to talk to somebody at work. And then I was watching myself breathe. I'm like, oh, I'm actually relaxed watching myself breathing. And this has not been my meditation experience. It's more like Barry's been like very effort filled. And so how does one get over that self-control and relax?
Right now, this is it. You're listening to me. You're looking at your screen. You can't, any effort just obscures it. Here you are. We're here naturally, all the time, effortlessly. The effort is just a departure. We go off somewhere into some purposefulness, into some idea, and then it dissolves, and here we are. We're coming back to our natural state. Philip, why don't you take over?
Okay, thank you. So chapter 44, Beyond Picking and Choosing. So this chapter too, I would recommend reading and rereading. These are wonderful chapters, very, very rich, very dense. I'll just say you all as I'm talking. So chapter 44, from the section Vipassana, the practice of awareness. So this section overall is the heart of the country. And this particular chapter is thick with major ideas. Chogyam Trungpa starts this chapter by saying, whatever you do is a sacred action. This is an entirely different worldview. Whatever you do is a sacred action. He says, Vipassana is that which enables you to see the potential for egolessness. This is the key to everything, egolessness. Egolessness is what separates the sacred from the profane. Egolessness. And Vipassana is the key. Chogyam Trungpa defines Vipassana as seeing in a special or superior way, seeing without personally localized ambition or ego-centered projects of any kind. So what does this really mean? It means seeing without blinders, seeing without veils, seeing without filters, seeing what really is, clear and panoramic vision, seeing without prejudice or preconceptions. We are always so judgmental. Everything we experience is put into categories, liking or disliking, good or bad, passion or aggression. Vipassana awareness replaces this altogether. Vipassana awareness explodes ignorance on every level. In this chapter, Chogyam Trungpa introduces 5 major ideas. The first is developing equilibrium. He says, with Vipassana, you are trying to develop a higher level of awareness. Your reactions are still sharp and precise, but accepting and rejecting are neutralized. It's not as if you become some kind of zombie, numb to the world around you. It's more like you become less of a slave to your own preconceptions. You can develop discrimination without prejudice. With Vipassana, your sense perceptions can be moderated by awareness, and the subtle consciousness associated with selecting, with liking and disliking, can be removed. It's a kind of enhanced honesty. As a result, you have more equilibrium. The second major idea he introduces in this chapter is catching thoughts as they arise. And this will sound familiar to those of you who have been to classes here before. He says, this process begins with shamatha. You simply see thoughts as thoughts. This is not just a psychological technique, it has a karmic effect as well. By mentally labeling thoughts, you avoid ego-based judgment. By simply saying thinking, you nullify good or bad, liking or disliking. In labeling, you cannot cut what has already happened, but while a flicker of thought is happening, you can cut that, and you can make sure the next thought does not come up. This is how it works. When you catch thoughts early, they do not have a chance to get to the level of liking or disliking, or to fall into the categories of love and hate, so they don't plant further karmic seeds or debts. Therefore, you're free. He says, labeling thoughts thinking begins to nullify karma in order not to sow karmic seeds. So it is important to develop mindfulness. Vipassana could be said to be the post-meditation experience that develops out of shamatha. However, cutting actions through awareness is too late. So Vipassana definitely has to be combined with shamatha, and thoughts need to be cut before they develop into actions. So we've encountered these ideas before when we were studying chapter 18, cutting the root of samsara, and chapter 34, cutting thoughts and short-circuiting the kleshas. So everything works together. In the Kagyu tradition, mindfulness awareness or shamatha vipassana are conflated into a single overarching practice. For that matter, so is meditation and post-meditation. It's all the same life we live after all. Then he moves on to the third major point, Vipassana awareness. So here he introduces one of the biggest ideas of all. He says, with awareness in your system, you begin to attain Vipassana heedfulness or Vipassana awareness. And out of that, you begin to develop continual samadhi, or the stillness that comes from being able to communicate with the fundamental goodness of the world. You see that the world is neither for you nor against you. The world is workable. It is no longer problematic, nor is it extraordinarily helpful. So it's 8:30 here in New England, and you all look tired. So I'm going to read this again. Sit back and relax and let the words sink in. This is what it is all about. Chogyam Trungpa says, with awareness in your system, you begin to attain Vipassana heedfulness or Vipassana awareness. And out of that, you begin to develop continual samadhi, or the stillness that comes from being able to communicate with the fundamental goodness of the world. The stillness that comes from being able to communicate with the fundamental goodness of the world. You see that the world is neither for you nor against you. The world is workable. It is no longer problematic, nor is it extraordinarily helpful. In the higher teachings, you begin to encounter the expression tatata, or as it is. The world is as it is. Realizing this, accepting this, is ultimately what equanimity is all about. Equilibrium and equanimity. It's our only chance. Chogyam Trungpa touches for a moment on the difference between spiritual growth and psychological growth. Then he returns to Vipassana awareness. He says, Vipassana awareness develops during post-meditation. He enjoins us to integrate shamatha and Vipassana into our daily lives, everywhere, all the time. He says, shamatha is the basic discipline of how you handle yourself in sitting practice, while Vipassana is how you handle yourself in post-meditation experiences. He points out that Vipassana is all over the place, everywhere. He says, you don't graduate from shamatha to Vipassana, they work together. Shamatha experience builds up to one-pointedness, a pinpointed focus. Vipassana, while still maintaining that pinpointedness, diffuses it into larger scale experience, exactly what John was just describing. So we're right there, and then we expand. And think about ego as I say that. Because we lose our ego as we do that. We have to lose our ego to do that. We're right there, and then we expand. We become part of the world. He repeats that the Kagyu lineage often speaks of the indivisibility of shamatha and Vipassana. This chapter moves fast. The fourth major idea is enjoying the gap. The gap, again, is openness. It's that space between dualistic thoughts, that moment when you're just being, existing in awareness without subject and object. He makes several points here regarding the gap. He says, it is important to spend time doing strict shamatha practice. However, in Vipassana, the emphasis should be more on the gaps than on the sitting practice alone. He cautions against recognizing the gap, analyzing the gap, realizing that you have had a gap. He enjoins us to leave the gap alone. Just have a gap and relax. If you begin to jump on your gaps, you begin to close them. Barry had a wonderful illustration for this. You can't look at it straight on. You can only see it in your peripheral vision. As soon as you look at it, it disappears. But it's there. It's there in your awareness. He finally says about gaps, he says, we should have awareness in everything we do, no matter how small. One thinks of a tea ceremony that they do in the Zen tradition and that Chogyam Trungpa brought to Karmacholi in Colorado. Everything is important. The bottom line here is just be. We are human beings, just be. And then finally, he touches on this last idea of sacred action and natural order. He says, whatever you do is sacred action. Pay attention to everything. He says doing things properly has an intrinsic logic of its own, which is already established. Beyond that is only personal judgment, prejudice, which is what we are trying to overcome. The way things should be done, the way things work, is simply in accordance with a natural order. Things take place properly. It is very basic and very simple. Beyond that are our personal judgments and our ideas of how things ought to be. Right? So we go through life thinking the world is a problem because it's not working out the way I think it should work. That's profoundly flawed reasoning. Chogyam Trungpa. But liking and disliking are purely the result of our passion and aggression. There is no intrinsic logic to liking and disliking. He says, through Vipassana, you can experience the vastness of the world. It does not help to be self-centered in your own world. You won't be able to expand very much. He says, we have the perfect opportunity for realizing awareness when we don't let hope or fear, liking or disliking come into the picture. That is how, even as beginners, we can actually reduce samsaric possibilities and free ourselves from future karma. He's talking about living in a world without ego. He concludes by saying, but we have to start at the beginning. We really have to earn it. We have to accomplish it. We ourselves have to do it. He says, that is what is meant by non-theism. Nobody else is going to save you. So reread this chapter. It's as good as they get. Thank you. So open up for questions, comments.
Thank you, Philip.
My pleasure, my privilege.
Yeah, it really is.
If no one else has anything to say, I will bring us back to this paragraph and I'll read it a third time. And we can talk about this some. He says, with awareness in your system, you begin to attain Vipassana heedfulness or Vipassana awareness. And out of that, you begin to develop continual samadhi, or the stillness that comes from being able to communicate with the fundamental goodness of the world. You see that the world is neither for you nor against you. The world is workable. It is no longer problematic, nor is it extraordinarily helpful.
He's describing sacred world, the world of Tantra.
I will call on people if no one volunteers.
That'd be good.
Okay. Shenyi, you would be a good one to comment on this.
Yes, Shinyi.
Well, I was just struck by how in Hinayana teaching is talking about continuous samadhi. It's like, that's pretty far away to continue samadhi, but I appreciate that. It's very profound. I was thinking of a question, but I can't really phrase it right now. It slips my mind. Maybe I'll come back to it later.
Shinyi, I think you understand this idea of vipassana awareness, resting.
Yeah, well, my understanding, I think, has evolved because listening to the teaching tonight just reminds me of how I understood it and how it has changed over time. I think I recalled one thing that really struck me when I was practicing, maybe like a year or two ago, was that there really is no thing to meditate on in Vipassana. It's really when I'm free of obscurations of the thoughts, that is Vipassana, and there really is nothing much beyond that point, and there's no need to search something or grab onto it. It's just already here. So I don't know. It reminded me of that realization, I guess, the teachings that you two presented. So thank you.
Yeah, and you can acknowledge it. You can say, yes, this is awareness. And then you let that go, that statement, because even that is a kind of like trying to grasp and hold on, which you can't do. So, but that acknowledgement is good. You can say, yes, this is awareness. I'm here. I'm awake. And then it goes because it's unnecessary to say that after it's said, dissolves.
Would you say that in like even more advanced practices, like even tantric practices, there's still both the element of mindfulness and awareness? Like you're still focusing one pointedly on something, but there is still the expansiveness of Vipassana.
Definitely. But they get changed a little bit. They become, so for instance, in tantric practice, there's a stage where you do what's called creation and completion practices. These are visualization practices, and you visualize maybe a visual image, but also there are sounds. It can be everything, all the senses. And in those, the idea of the precision of the awareness of the sense objects, like the pupils of the eyes of the deity that you're visualizing, or the way they hold their hands, that's very shamatha. And then the overall awareness of the quality of it is vipassana. So the two elements get translated into tantric practice very much. But beyond that, when you get to Mahamudra in the Kagyu tradition or Dzogchen in the Nyingma tradition, then we're back to really, really basic shamatha and vipassana. It's amazing. It's just like, it's so simple. It's just utter clear awareness.
John, who was that teacher that visited and said that wasn't meditation?
Oh, that was I've forgotten his name now.
That was such a shocker.
Yeah, but that's not true. I mean, that's one way of saying it. I mean, he's just saying that it's not really the real ultimate where you're going. But Trungpa Rinpoche is saying it's an absolute essential. Shamatha is an essential element of our practice. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, Miriam.
Miriam.
Yeah, hi. So I took note, Philip, of the repetition for that paragraph, and the part around the world is workable. It is no longer problematic, nor is it extraordinarily helpful. And I'm reading this, and at the same time, I'm so conscious of the recent events in the world where I can't help but see people, including myself, react with a lot of aversion or horror. And it doesn't matter towards whom. It's very difficult to see that the world is no longer problematic. And so I'm trying to reconcile that. And I think there is a strong judgment, like this is wrong, it shouldn't be happening, it's horrific, unfair to some people. And yet understand that this too is part of some sort of karmic unfolding, or that it's human nature, and that, not to have any value judgment towards it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I hear you. I hear you 100%, and I agree with you. So last night we were talking about anger and hatred and patience as the antidote to that. And I didn't speak up because it just sounded so hopeless and depressing. Patience seems like such a meager antidote for the huge amount of hatred and anger that exists in this world. And I think about that a lot, and recently because of what's going on in the Middle East. But it's all over, and it's always been like that. It never changes. Our species is a horrible species. It really is. For the human beings to go extinct would be the best thing that the planet Earth could possibly experience. That's what it comes down to. But it comes down to ta-ta-ta. It is what it is. So that's what this is saying. The world is what it is. And still, somehow, it's fundamentally good. We are a speck in the universe. And our feelings matter, but, to whom and for how long and how far? So this is terrible. I hear these horrible stories coming out of the Middle East. It breaks my heart. But I'm a speck in the universe. Go back 100 years, it's the same thing. Go back 1,000 years, it's the same thing. Humans have never been different.
So I guess it's a matter of accepting that capacity for destruction.
Well, we are a part of this universe. We are a part of this universe.
I guess it's accepting the fact that it's in us too.
That's going to what?
That this capacity for destruction could be in us as well. I mean, we're trying to transmute that, right? With this practice.
Yeah, what's Pema's title? Start where you are, right? So you start with your own heart and your own mind. Where else can you start? And you only have like 80 years. How much can you do? It's, we're like Hemingway characters. There's no hope of success. There's no hope of,
Unless you think we have countless lives.
Well, there is that, right?
Yeah, but isn't acceptance mean not trying to get absorbed in wishing it was different, and or trying to try to go into some sort of denial or something, but really having your eyes open and really seeing what is.
Exactly.
And then, of course, you may very well be called to action, but that would be based on clear seeing
And compassion.
and compassion.
Not in a sentimental sort of sappy sense, but in the sense of bringing people into clear, easy being and awareness with what is, and being able to work with it, oneself and others, in a way that is full of clarity and love. And I think that that's always available.
I got a cool little lesson in compassion. I just remembered. I went to dinner with a couple of other people, and we all had some leftovers we were taking out with us. And as we left the place, there was a beggar standing there, and my friend, without hesitation, just gave them her food. and walked on. And it was just such a, you know, it was just a pure gift. I mean, there was no, now you need to thank me for that or any of that stuff. And, it was just, oh, I have food, they're hungry, here.
Yeah, that's what they mean. No giver, no gift, no receiver. Yeah, it's perfect. With it, we were all like that all the time.
A lot of people who aren't speaking. Judy and Fred and Jill. Any thoughts?
Carolyn. Oh, here's
It-
Judy.
Yeah,
Judy,
yeah. I'm just struck anew by how important the Hinayana is and how present it is, no matter which book you're in and which state of mind you're in. It's what John keeps reminding us, and it's just right there.
Hmm.
It's really striking how many times you can hear it put in so many ways and still be a target that it hits in a slightly different way. Amazing. It's really phenomenal.
I find that really reassuring because a lot of these teachings, I mean, this one I spent some time preparing for, I had stuff in there that I wasn't that sure what the heck was going on there. And so you take in what you can, and then maybe the next time around, there it is. It makes sense. It works.
Yeah,
So you're in a place where you're able to hear it.
yeah. And then to wonder how many times you as a target will have to be hit before you take it in a totality.
It's like giving up smoking. You just do it and do it and do it and do it until finally it's done.
Well said.
for
May
years
it,
I wanted a cigarette. And I'm amazed that now I don't anymore. I really
Yeah,
don't.
isn't that weird?
But for years, the smell of smoke was appealing.
If I saw someone smoking, I'd go over and stand next to him so I could kind of get a bit of the. That was a tough one. But I'll tell you, some of the addictions that I don't know if they're addictions, but I can recall like the voice of the watcher used to be so strong and persistent with me that I started to become more and more aware of how I wasn't able to actually really see anything because all the commentary was so immediate and I guess it was that growing awareness that where somehow it subsided. Took a while.
As it subsided for me, I'll continually find myself lost in daydream,
Oh, well, yeah. But
making comments,
mm,
mental comments, without even realizing I'm doing it until I suddenly do, sometimes.
and it can become more subtle too. Like it may not be quite as top of mind, but it can still be there. It's funny. It's so interesting. It's just to me, it's just fascinating, and it never stops being that way.
Mm.
And when I'm irritated with something, and I get so caught up in the irritation, and suddenly I realize I'm telling myself a story.
Yeah.
A story that is kindling and embodying this anger.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
You could read these 2 chapters over and over. They're really good. And I'll tell you, this idea of shamatha and vipassana goes all the way through to the end of the path. It just becomes more subtle and more elevated.
Mm.
I also really like the way that this relates so closely with what we just were studying about, especially mindfulness of mind, right?
Mm.
I found it really helpful to review some of that and thinking about this chapter, going over it.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken. Jill, do you have any thoughts? Sarah? Tanya?
I'm just enjoying being a part of the class and hearing the teachings. I'm a teacher of middle school students, so all of this is very, very helpful. I've been doing it for 13 years as a middle school art teacher. And at times I feel like I'm being pulled into mental gymnastics with all the different kids and activities and lunchtime. And I work really hard to try to be, remain in that calm place, be the calm in the storm. And these teachings and being here with you guys is helping me through it.
Ah, that's wonderful. Thank you for being so helpful to other people. Fred, you're grinning from ear to ear.
It's just nice to hear that. And when you get this that line, it's workable. I kind of use it. I don't know. I almost feel like I'm using it like a pacifier sometimes. Especially like if I'm really down in a slump, and it kind of reminds me to come back. Especially if I see something that upsets me or bothers me, that I wish was different. And like it's workable. All right, you just don't see it. Relax. That's a tough one. I don't know why that's so hard. It's like it's a big joke about our nature, I suppose. And Shinyi's cat's hilarious. I don't know what the cat is doing. It's
She wants her last meal of the day. So.
oh, she's like performing.
It's everywhere.
Anyways, please ignore her.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Barry and Philip. And the one thought I have today from practice and this teaching is that nature brings me back. Living where we do, there's all this opportunity. And today was just, there was so much clarity. The sky was incredibly blue, and the fall colors at lower elevations are just it was kind of like one of those neon experiences, like boom, it's there. And the danger is, I appreciate, Fred, what you said. It's like I want to hold on to that feeling, that awareness. And my struggle is coming back. It's like, oh, making the bed, washing a dish, relating it to a difficult situation. And responding with compassion, not with some like trying to fix it or gloss it over, being totally present for it. And yet there's so many opportunities for self-judgment, prejudice, anger that will take me right out of that blue sky. Why don't I want that freedom? That's freedom from suffering. So I have to, question myself every day. It's like, why don't I want more freedom? Well, like smoking a cigarette. I'm used to it. It's habit. It's what I have practiced all my life. And now I have a new practice. So thank you.
That's well said. And in a way, it ties back to what Miriam was saying in my really sorry response to that, because I also find my greatest joy and happiness in nature. It is just gorgeous. Climbing mountains and being in Vermont and appreciating rainstorms and rainbows and the moon, and sharing that with people and meditating on mountains and wondering, who is the meditator and who is the mountain and all of that stuff. And yet it is all the world, Miriam. It's the same thing. Nature is bloody in tooth and claw. Nature is red in tooth and claw. It's not just humans who are a nasty species. Every species, if they're not eating some other species, they're being eaten by some other species. That's part of nature too, as much as the sunrise and the sunset and the stars and the moon. So this is all the world we live in. So how can it be fundamentally good? That's how it's inordinately complex.
Fred.
And that goodness, Philip, right? That's naturally there and that we're speaking of. I know it's there, and I forget about it sometimes, like I'm sure we all do. But there's one situation that I keep coming back to, where on my old floor in this building where we used to live, there was a neighbor who had a real grudge with us because the kids would be in the hall, the dogs would bark, it'd be too noisy, and somehow building management got involved and said that he's never supposed to speak with us again, and like he would really commit to us, get on the elevator. Like if he saw us on the elevator, he'd take the next one and take the stairs and make a whole big show of it. But then one day he was holding a bunch of packages, couldn't see what was going on, and he held the elevator door for me, and I just smiled. I walk in, and then he sees me, and he, for like that second, he's like, he remembered, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be mad at him, like he's playing a character. And I'm like, it's a lot of effort. And I'm like, I know, I'm sure I do that. And look at all sorts of stories out there that's in the media, right? People are spending millions and millions, and if not billions of dollars to put this stuff out there. It takes a lot of effort to remember, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be this, I'm supposed to be that. But right there, it's right. But then we got to reconcile, right? That we might eat a chicken. How do we do that? I don't know. And the best I got is I'm like, all right, may I get stronger to help somebody, right? So I don't wither away into just bones and die before I'm supposed to, or whatever. I don't know. It's the best I got.
Yeah, people agree that our greatest joy comes from helping others.
Yeah, that's how people quit drinking, right? They like I heard the story that one guy, I forget if it was Dan that was told it or someone else, that one guy didn't want to drink and he found an alcohol. He went through the phone book, found the only alcoholic in town, and helped him. And then him and that alcoholic agreed to find and help somebody else.
Well, perhaps we should end now. What do you think? Shall I put up the chats? Closing chats?
Yes.
Okay. And who would like to lead us in the closing chats?
How about Yi?
Shin
I
Yi?
was just going to
Sure.
volunteer, Shenyi.
Thank you, Shin Yi.
Okay. Can you put up the chat?
I'll wait and mute all. Hold on. And then Shin Yi, unmute yourself, please.
We close by chanting a prayer for peace and in dedicating the merit for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened, compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and no other maladies soften this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May ye defeat enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the victim's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.